Hello, and welcome to Scattered Terrain. My name is Meredith, and today I'm going to be showing you how I make my spiral staircase.
Here are the dimensions that we need to cut out of the foam in order to build our staircase. So the first thing you're going to want to do is grab your Proxxon hot wire cutter. I keep mine set right around 3. Then you want to put your guide bar in place. And personally, I like using this taller guide that I built in order to make sure that my cuts stay straight no matter how tall my piece is. And then you're going to want to line your wire up 1 inch away from your guide. And then we'll cut 1 inch wide strips out of our 1 inch foam. And remember, with a hot wire cutter, low and slow is the way to go. It gives you much better control over what you're doing. Then we take those 1 inch strips that we've made and we cut them down to the right heights to build our stairs. All right, our stairs are starting to take shape. And then we're going to cut our steps. Now I cut my steps at about 1/4 of an inch thick. That way there wouldn't be any large visual drops between 1 inch square sections, but it would be shallow enough that I could still stand a miniature on each square without them falling off. One of these 1/4 inch squares you're going to want to cut directly in half horizontally, and then the other one you're going to want to cut on an angle point to point. That way our stairs make that spiral around the corner. And let's just take a quick look here at the difference it makes adding in these extra steps. Now that all our foam's cut, we can put this guy away. Our next step is going to be to carve our stairs to look like they're made of stone. Now every cut piece of foam is going to be slightly different, so we're going to want to label our pieces to make sure that we know how it all fits together in the end. So I'm just going to label each half of these pairs either top or bottom to tell me which step they go on. Now you're going to want to take a look at both sides of your foam square before you write on it. Sometimes one side of the foam will have a defect and you want to use that as your underside where you write this. And then we'll just do the same thing here for our triangles. And see here we have that line down the front. We're going to want to write on that side. Then we grab our tallest block and our top step. And you're going to dry fit in place where this step is going to go, and then mark an X underneath. There's a fair amount of space on these stairs where you're not going to be able to see parts of the foam, so we mark that foam as we go so that we don't do more work than we have to. And when you're dry fitting this in place, you want to double check and see if any of the sides of the foam have that factory finish edge. If they do, you want to keep those 2 sides lined up together. That way you have one nice smooth edge. And then we're going to hold that top step in place, and with our X-Acto blade, we're going to make a line in the stone right at the edge of the step. Then you're going to turn your foam block on its side, and you're going to draw the next step down into the foam. So we're going to use the top step as our distance guide, and on the half of the block that does not have the X, we're going to carve this lower step. And then flip it over and do exactly the same thing on the other side using that step for a depth gauge. And if you lay your X-Acto blade into the slice on top, you can rock it over the edge until you line up with your lower line. That way you're sure you come to a nice point. And I'm just going to make sure I have a nice clean line. And then to finish carving this step, you want to make sure to take both of those side lines and connect them across the front. Now we simply grab our pencil and use that to deepen all of the grooves that we've cut to sell the effect that this is a separate piece of stone. And as you can see, when we put our top step back on, it now looks like these 2 steps are made the same way. Then we're going to grab our next biggest block and our top angled step. Then we're going to do that dry fit and X out the side that we're placing the step. Then make sure that you have the steps snugly in place and that both sides line up. Then take your X-Acto blade and draw a shallow slice right along the face of the step. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did with the other stair. Using this step to gauge the distance, we're going to draw the bottom edge of the step onto our block. Now because this step cuts diagonally across the tile, we get to draw the entire line across 2 full sides of this block. So what I do is I'll measure my depth at the corners and then connect a straight line from side to side. And then very gently you want to make a small vertical incision to connect the bottom of the tile to that top diagonal line. And make sure that you flip it over and do the other side and corner as well. I'm just gonna make sure I have a good clean line, and then I'm gonna come back over with the pencil and deepen these grooves. Now you wanna be very gentle with these corner pieces because they're quite thin right at the edge. So just take it nice and slow and be gentle, and then deepen the other grooves. All right, and then we'll give that a test fit with its upper stair. Looking good. And then as you can see, these steps will connect here, and we've got the top half of our staircase. Moving on to our third block, we're gonna grab the bottom half of that diagonal step and test fit it into place here. And then we're gonna make that shallow slice with the X-Acto blade along the edge of the tile to start our bottom step, and make that X to remind ourselves which side the tile's gonna be covering. Then we use our top step as a distance marker. Mark the distance at our corners, connect our corners across, make our delicate vertical incisions, and repeat on the other side. Then we grab our pencil and deepen the grooves. And then we do our quick test fit here. Yeah, looks good. And we'll just put him into place with the other stairs and grab our final block. And take a quick look here and just see if there's any particular side of the foam we want to use up. And then test fit your bottom step and give it a quick X. And then holding the step smooth against the back of the block, go ahead and cut your dividing line with the X-Acto. And then follow that same process of using your step to mark your depth and trace your bottom step into the bottom block. And then we're going to follow up with our pencil and widen those grooves. All right, and then double check for that factory edge. Make sure we're putting it to the back of the step. And yeah, that's what we're looking for. So we'll go ahead and put him in place with the others. And now all of our stairs look like they're the same, even though half of them are carved and half of them are going to be glued in place. Next, we're going to cover the remainder of the block in stone texture. So once again, we're going to start off with our tallest block. We'll just set this top step aside. And then we're going to grab the next block down and line them up the way that they're going to be on the final staircase. This way we can mark out the area that we don't need to carve a stone texture into and save ourselves from doing work that we're never gonna see. Grab your X-Acto, and at the corners you're gonna mark the line where the step ends. Then just connect the two lines across the center. And we'll just give a quick X here to remind ourselves that we don't have to texture this section because we'll never see it. Now for the stone texture on this staircase, I want it to blend in with all of my wall pieces. So I'm just going to grab a section of wall to use as a reference and make sure that my lines are about the same distance apart. That way all of my bricks will blend together. For my walls, I do 3 layers of bricks for every 1 inch of height. So I'm just going to carve out my brick layers. Then I'm going to carry my halfway line around to the other side. And I'm going to do this by taking my halfway line around one corner and then flipping it over and drawing the halfway line around from the other corner and then drawing my final line to meet in the middle across the back. Then I just repeat that same process for all of the brick layers above and below that halfway line. And where the steps are, this makes a rather strange shaped stone. So what I'm going to do is just draw a vertical line here and turn it into 2 stones. And you can see here's the section that we don't have to texture, so we'll skip that, move to the other side, and we'll draw our side stones in the same way. Now you could draw your halfway line going in the other direction if you'd prefer. Just make sure that you split the stone the same way on both sides. As long as both sides match, it'll work perfectly fine either way. And just continue with your X-Acto until you've drawn all of the brick layers around your block. Once the layers are complete, it's time to start drawing the individual bricks. Now as you can see here, this block is 2 walls high. All of the bricks in my walls are drawn at 1/2 inch. So starting with one end of the block, we're going to divide the bottom layer into 1/2 inch bricks. Since my block is 1 inch wide, this means simply dividing the bottom layer in half on each side. And then we want our layers of bricks to alternate, so you're going to work your way up the side of the block, drawing a 1/2 inch line on every other layer of tiles. And you're going to follow this exact same pattern on all of the faces of the block. Now we want our brick layers to be offset like you see with my wall tile, so once we're done drawing our 1/2-inch lines, we're going to come back to the layers that we skipped and draw your brick lines roughly halfway between the other bricks. And make sure on that bottom layer that you wrap it around to the underside of the tile. And just as before, you're going to want to make sure you do that to all 4 sides of the block. Oh, and it looks like I skipped this side. So we're just going to go in and draw our 1/2-inch bricks, and then come back and draw our offsets. Do a quick once over here, make sure we didn't miss any other lines, and then switch over to our pencil and deepen those grooves. And I'm going to do this in the same order that I did last time, of drawing all of the layer lines first, and then circling back and drawing the individual bricks. And again, when you get to the bottom, you want to make sure to wrap that line into the underside. Oh, and if as you're going along making these lines, you slip a little bit with your pencil and wind up missing that groove, don't worry about it. We can turn that into a crack. This is going to be an old stonework after all, so we're going to be aging it. Just feather the end of that line a little bit here, and we've got a crack. And just continue with your pencil until you've deepened the groove between all of the bricks. Now on that top layer of bricks, just like we did on the bottom, you're going to want to make sure to wrap your dividing line up and over the edge into the section where we're going to be gluing that top step. All right, and then we'll just put our top step back in place here. And then you just follow this exact same process with the rest of your stair blocks. And here's what it should look like when you're all finished. Now that we've drawn all of our bricks in place, the next step is to age and texture our stone. So the first thing I'm going to do in the aging process is I'm going to add cracks to the steps. Now you don't want every step to have a crack in it, so we're going to keep the stairs assembled a bit as we're making these. That way, as we're looking at our steps and planning where to put a crack, we know where it's actually going to be on the final product. So I think for this crack, I'm going to put it right at the very edge of my piece. That way it's sort of in the center of the spiral. Figure that's a rather high traffic area, people cutting that tight corner. And then we're going to skip a step and add a crack to this one. And this time we'll go to the opposite corner, mix things up a little. And I'm going to make sure that I carry that crack down the front of the step and wrap it under the bottom. And then take a quick look here, see what we think. Yeah, I like it. I've got enough cracks that it looks old, but not overdone. Now we're going to use that same technique to add some cracks to the other bricks. Now you don't want to overdo it with this step, so I would say you want to add somewhere between 2 to 5 cracks to each section of the stairs. The more cracks you add, the more old and run down your final piece is going to look. Now I am actually going for a slightly more run down look with this staircase, so I think I'm going to go into this cornerstone here and make this one brick seem to be crumbling away. And as you're looking where you want to place your cracks, if there's anywhere that your foam is damaged in some way, that is the perfect place to add additional damage to make the damage that's already there look like it's on purpose. And as you can see, what was once a dent in the foam now just looks like a chip in the rock. I'll take care of that other ding here too, by just shaving it down with the edge of my pencil a bit. This side looks a little too clean, so we're going to add a crack in up here. Oh, I missed this side entirely. All right, and then just give it a quick once over. Yeah, that looks like enough age for me. Next, we're going to want to texture with aluminum foil, so we're going to take all of our small stairs and lay them together, and then gently roll them with some crumpled up aluminum foil. This crumpled aluminum foil helps to give a really organic rock-like texture to the foam. And I find it really helps to stack pieces that are the same size and shape together when texturing the edges. This helps prevent a lot of breaking issues. And we're going to do the same thing with our angled steps. And you want to make sure that you get all the sides of the stairs that you're going to be able to see. On these diagonal steps, that means that this long edge is actually one that we're going to see. So let me go ahead and texture him up real quick. And then with aging on stairs, you'll find that the part of the step that is used the most is going to age the most. So I'm going to grab this texture tool that I made by rolling a pencil in some green stuff and train ballast, and I'm going to use it to dig out the very center edge of each step, to make it that area that people step on the most is worn down the most. Just sort of give each step a little divot on that leading edge. And you're going to repeat that same wearing process on all of the steps. And don't forget, on the top step, that back end is not going to be pressed up against another layer, so you want to texture that final side of the top step too. And if at any time you're not sure what the leading edge of your step is going to be, just go ahead and test fit it back in place, and immediately it'll be clear where people are going to be stepping. And then you're going to want to gather your blocks together and use that same aluminum foil texturing process to cover all 5 visible sides with that texture. And I've just hot glued some crumpled up aluminum foil to a wooden dowel to give myself a sort of textured rolling pin here. I find it's a little bit faster than using the aluminum foil ball for larger surface areas. Just remember, you don't have to worry about texturing anywhere that you've got marked off with an X. Then give it a quick once over, see if there's any spots you missed. Oh, yeah, it looks like I haven't done this side yet. There we go. I'll get just a little more texture on this side. And for smaller pieces, I still do have that aluminum foil ball handy because it's easier to add a little bit more precise texture right where you need it. And you know what? I actually don't think I need to texture this spot right here because I believe this is up against the other step. Yep, you're never gonna see this part. And then as a final stone texturing step, you want to make sure to take that aluminum foil ball and nick at all of your corners. That's one of the places wear and tear happens the most, so you don't want to have that perfect factory edge visible. And make sure that you also do that top step and the edge. And then I'm going to grab that same texturing tool that I used to wear down the leading edge of each step, and I'm going to add a little bit of its texture all over these blocks. That way you have a little bit of a uniform texture everywhere, and it's not obvious that there's one tool that I only used in one place. And you're just going to follow that same aluminum foil texturing on all of our blocks. And make sure that you do that additional damage to the front of every step, including the ones that are carved into the foam blocks. And then just finish off that texturing on the final 2 pieces. And then double check what the leading edge of your step is. And chew down that front edge. Just do a quick double check here. Make sure that I've got the right side of each step worn down. And then texture the final piece. Once all of our foam is textured, we can begin our assembly. So you're going to grab your bottle of PVA glue, and this is full strength white glue, we're not watering this down any. And then using a pencil, we're going to gouge out some texture into the area that we're gluing together. Scuffing up the surface with the pencil like this gives the white glue something to really grab hold of, and it makes your final product much stronger. And then you're going to put some PVA glue onto one half, and then work it into some of those grooves with your finger. And then while both pieces are flat on the table, you're going to press the 2 halves together firmly. You know, I didn't add enough white glue to this. It's not really sticking together. So I'm going to go ahead and add white glue to the other half of my stairs as well. Once again, keeping them flat on the table, push the 2 pieces together. There we go. Now we have enough glue. And just wipe off the excess. Once you're sure that your 2 blocks are exactly how you want them, you're going to take a couple of straight pins and you're going to poke them through where you're gluing your next step at a diagonal into the other block. These pins will help hold your foam together and in place until the white glue dries. You can also add a few straight pins on the sides, going in between grout lines into the neighboring block. By using the straight pins through those grout lines on the side and going from both blocks into each other, it helps make a much more tight and snug fit while that glue dries. Then you're going to do the exact same thing with the smaller 2 halves of the stairs. Make sure you're gluing the correct sides together here. And then because these both have a brick line drawn into them, I don't need to gouge them up any further. So I'll just put some glue in between and pin our 2 blocks together. Going in through where we're going to be gluing that step on top, and then again only entering in through grout lines on the side. Then make sure that you don't have any pins in the way of connecting our 2 blocks together. And then you're going to add your white glue to the smaller half of your bricks before putting both halves flat on the table and pressing them firmly together. And if you give them a little bit of a wiggle back and forth, it helps to work the PVA glue down into those crevices between the brick lines. And once you're sure you have everyone snug and in place, use a few more pins to secure the 2 halves together. And then set this aside to dry. Then in a few hours, once that's had time to set, go ahead and pull all those straight pins back out. Now if any of them are difficult to pull out, give it a gentle back and forth rocking wiggle as you pull on it, and it should come free. Sometimes it also helps to twist the pin back and forth while wiggling it. From time to time when you're pulling these pins out, they will bring a little chunk of foam with them, but if that happens, we can just turn it into some free weathering. All right, and then on each section that we're going to be gluing down a step, you're just going to take your pencil and rough it up. Give you some good gouges to glue into here. Then we're going to grab our stairs and divide them into top and bottom, and starting with the bottom, we're going to rough up the side that we wrote on. And then give a good coating of glue to each step. Whoop. And then just work the glue onto the step with your finger. Make sure it's in those little crevices. And you also want to make sure that on the bottom steps you get glue where they're going to be touching the next step up. And then press your step into place. All right, that looks wonderful. Then work glue into the next step. And set him in place. And make sure that your step is sitting flush with the side. Yeah, looking good. Once you've glued your bottom steps in place, you can repeat this process with the top steps. Now the reason I do this the bottom half first and then the top half is as soon as you start to rough up the underside of the step, you can no longer see if it says top or bottom. And while it probably wouldn't make too much of a difference if you got them mixed up, sometimes your tiles aren't quite the same size and you'll be able to see that difference. So I find it's much easier to just do one half at a time and guarantee that I'm putting the right step in the right place. And then with the top step, you want to keep in mind that there is no next step to connect to, so you only need to put glue on the bottom of this top step. So let me just wipe the back off here and get him laid in place. And just a gentle pressure, make sure that he's all lined up. Now before you set your stairs aside to dry, just do a quick once over, make sure all of your steps are flush with the sides of your stairs. And once your stairs are where you want them, set him aside to dry. And then when all of your glue is completely dry, pull out any remaining pins that you have in place, and we'll move on to our next step, ModPodge. So grab your container of ModPodge and your damp brush, and give this whole piece a thorough going over with a thin coat of ModPodge. You don't want to build it up too thick or you'll lose all of this wonderful textured detail that we've made, but you do want to give it a good coating so that it protects what we've got here and prevents extra damage from happening that we don't want. And make sure when that first layer of ModPodge is dry that you come back and do the bottom of the stairs as well. Then once that ModPodge layer is dry, it's time to give the stairs a good base coat. For these stairs, I'm looking to match that same aged marble alabaster look that I used for my Sanguine Temple build, so I'm going to be using that same color palette. That means my base coat is going to be a raw sienna. So we'll just put a little bit onto our fancy palette here, and with a damp brush, give a good base coat all over our stairs. Like with the ModPodge, you don't want to put this on too thick because you don't want to lose any of that texture. And then once your base coat has dried, if you can still see some splotchy pink foam through it, just give it a second base coat. We're going to use that same raw sienna, and this time I'm going to keep a little bit of water to hand so that I can keep my brush damp throughout this process. You really don't want to go too thick with this second coat, it's just to cover up those thin spots. And once you've got good coverage with your base coat, it's time to move on to the overbrushing. So we're going to grab a paper towel and our fancy palette, And then we're gonna grab some light mocha and our beat up dry brush here. And I'm gonna just warm the dry brush up in my hand a little bit, make sure that all of the bristles are nice and soft. And then I'm gonna work that light mocha pretty deep into the bristles. And I'm gonna work some of it off on the paper towel, but you don't wanna work off too much. Give it a quick test run in my hand here or on the bottom of the piece. That tells me exactly how much paint I've got in my brush. And then go ahead and give a good overbrushing all over your staircase. I realized partway through my coating of this that I was actually going far too light with this. This is more of a dry brushing that I'm doing here, and this step really needs to be a thicker overbrushing, so you want to make sure you go pretty heavy with this first overbrushing. When you're finished with your overbrushing, this is about the amount of coverage that you're looking for. You just want to have little bits of that base coat color peeking through the lower areas, but the majority of your piece is going to now be this light mocha. Then once our overbrushing is dry, it's time to move on to the wash. For this wash, I used a burnt sienna, and I mixed it in a ratio of 10 parts water to 1 part paint. I find this gives me a good amount of color in my wash without being overpowering. And so you're going to give a gentle but thorough once over with this wash to every surface of your stairs. And you don't want it to be too heavy or to pool up too much, really. If there's a little bit of pooling, that's all right, but if it gets too heavy, you just want to tap your brush to it to soak up a little bit of the extra. And then once everything on the stairs is coated with the wash, you can just set this aside to dry. Once the wash has dried, it's time for our final step. We're going to come back to our stairs with one final dry brushing of that light mocha. So once again, using our beat up dry brush, we're going to work some paint into the bristles. And this time we're going to take almost all of the paint off of the brush. When you do the test run in the palm of your hand, you just barely want the tiniest bit of paint to come off on the texture of your skin. And again, I still always test it on the bottom of the piece as well, just to make sure that I have the amount of paint I think I have. And then using a very gentle downwards motion, you're going to just ever so slightly lighten the very tops of all the texture. And you want to build up the right amount of paint over several passes with the brush. And if you start to think that you're not getting any color transfer, load up with a little more paint. Don't forget to test it again on your hand or on the bottom of the piece. And when you're doing the stairs, you want to pay special attention to that leading edge that we added the extra wear to. You're going to want to hit it extra with the brush here as well to really highlight that leading edge. And just to give you a quick look at what it is we're actually achieving here with this dry brushing, here's the side I haven't gotten to yet versus the side I just did. And so you just want to make sure that you cover all of the bricks on your staircase and just complete this light dry brushing until you've covered the entire staircase. At this point, our spiral staircase is completely finished, though I do take mine outside to give it a coat of a matte spray varnish for an extra protective layer. And so here's a look at our final completed spiral staircase. You could use this exact same technique using any paint color scheme to match your existing dungeon tiles. Speaking of, let's take a peek at how these stairs look when they're laid out on the table with other pieces. You sneak down the spiraling staircase into the murky depths below. The cries of the captured villagers guide your steps down the hall. Dividing the party between the two cages, you begin to work on the locks. There's a footfall behind you, and you turn to find two cultists blocking the way out. Roll for initiative.
And that's how I make my spiral staircase. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you how I make my altar. Stick around.
Thanks for spending some of your time here with me at Scattered Terrain. If you liked that video, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.